Hugh Davies. As I mentioned before, the first clinician for Moog was Chris Swanson, and I think the first historian of any note for electroacoustic music was Hugh Davies. And of course, I knew Hugh, and we always kind of referred to each other as the other historian, you know. And uh, I was thinking that I appeared, I guess it was in 1991, at the Bourges Festival in France for electroacoustic music because Francois Berrier and Christian Clousier had, I don't know where they'd even heard me speak, but they felt like I was not chauvinistic as an American, you know. So why? I mean, a lot of this stuff happened in Germany and France and, you know, England, and wherever it takes you, that's where you go. Anyway, I got some nice invitations and wound up at Bourges, and I hadn't seen Hugh in years since I'd first been to England, and uh, he translated my entire lecture into French spontaneously. He was a marvelous guy. He did word by word translations in the Cyrillic Russian, you know, for God's sakes, to find out about ANS and crazy stuff in Russia and little known things. And that was Hugh. And he was, I sort of thought of myself as more of an outside guy talking to people out in the field and collecting data. And Hugh is an inside guy, you know, in the library and just doggedly doing these incredible things. And of course, he wrote all those wonderful articles in the New Grove Dictionary of Musical Instruments, in which he was so kind as to cite my work, you know, in every case, even in places where I felt like, well, I didn't tell you anything about that. He knew more than I did, you know. Still, if I wrote anything about it, there would be the citation. Very kind. A good musician, a person who had ideas about improvisation and cogent ideas. He wrote a very interesting tract. Oh, and we went up on the train after Bourges through Paris, and then went out to Den Haag, where this museum had started some work that he had sort of propelled. This collection of instruments. They had a lot of very nice instruments, but they weren't being displayed real prominently. And I tried to prevail upon them to do that. The current director was kind of interested in big pieces that looked like art. Now, I was more interested, no, to show everything you got, show as much of the story as you can. But they were kind of having a white wall period, you know. Let's put this Neo Bechstein over against this white wall. Let's put this Moog that they got, I think, from John Appleton up at Dartmouth, and let's put it over against this white wall, and it'll look like MoMA or the music, you know, the Guggenheim or something. I don't know what was going on, and I really don't know where it's gone, you know, particularly. But Hugh was instrumental in that. Had done a much better job than I'd been able to do, at least of getting some instruments together. Maybe the zeitgeist in Europe was a little more felicitous than it had always been in America. But Hugh was the kind of person that left so little footprint on the earth and gave so much, you know, that of course he's sorely missed by me and many other people, I'm certain. Interesting too, an aside, Hugh is related tangentially. After that meeting again, in which we sort of, you know, refanned those flames of knowing each other, and he told me about this book where he talked about improvisation. It was like a chapter or something. He told me the name, obviously, it stuck immediately. And I flew home and was there by myself in Europe. My wife was in the U.S. And when I got home, I told Muriel, I said, well, wow, I'm so wired, you know, from doing all this the last 10 days and seeing you and meeting Arno Mensink was one of the people there at the museum, and, you know, a wonderful experience of seeing some of the things I dreamed about happening, instruments being shown in a museum, you know, wonderful. Uh, I said, I'm not going to be able to go to sleep. Let's just go out to the Berkshires here in Massachusetts. And we did, totally kind of at random. And, oh, while Hugh and I were at the museum in Netherlands, they showed me this wonderful color picture, sort of faded, of the New World Ensemble from Ferde Grofe that had been at a little kiosk at the 1939 World's Fair in New York as part of the Ford building. 4 Nova chords and a Hammond organ with Ferde Grofe, doing the honors and arrangements and stuff. Wonderful idea. Here's an ensemble in 1939 of electric instruments. Down on the Midway, by the way, Tom Adrian Craycraft had a different ensemble of Benjamin Franklin Meissner instruments, basically, mostly stringed instruments. That at the World's Fair, and basically, just there as a kind of a sideshow. Nobody thought much about it. Oh, yeah, that was weird stuff. So anyhow, I had those two things in my mind. The publication with Hugh, said very hard to find, and that photo. They subsequently sent me a huge poster that had been done professionally of that photo, which I now have. Wonderful. Came home very tired, very wired, went out, driving along, and saw a little sign, a little A-frame sign, book sale today. I said, I've got 3,000 books or more, and, let's book sale, obviously. So we trucked up the little road, the book sale at some high school, paid $1 or $2, and walked in and turned immediately to the right and saw this stall. And I am not exaggerating. I walked over to the ephemera, the paper material in this stall, which was books and ephemera, and did this and leaned forward and found in a plastic folder the brochure with the same picture on it that I'd just seen of the New World Ensemble with Ferde Grofe. And I called Bureau and I said, look at this. And I told her the story. I said, they had this beautiful poster and so forth. And then I did this. I looked over here and reached up and pulled down Hugh's book. Okay? Now, Jung, the psychologist, wrote a wonderful book called Synchronicity, in which I believe a great deal of what can happen for us is because our antennae are out. We're in an intense mode. We're really paying attention, as my mother would say. Pay attention. Yeah, we're paying attention. And multitudinous objects that we didn't see before or hear before now are there, and we hear and see and so forth. I don't think it's just, 6 degrees of coincidence and so forth. I think when you're really vibrant and vibrating almost, that you get what I call a nexus. You find places where, there's opportunity here. I know what to do. I'll do this. Like when I saw the Moog synthesizer and said, that's going someplace and I'm going to go there. That's going to be an interesting career. I'm going to go do that right now. It worked for me. But, just as an aside about Hugh, I was so, stoked and wired, having seen Hugh and Kindred Soul, that I could talk about everything I could say. He would know exactly about it and tell me more than I knew. And, an amazing guy, like a walking encyclopedia. And then back and bang, those two things, just right off the top. Here it is, pulled it out, wasn't much money, bought it, of course. It was given out at the World's Fair. Here's the other, here it is right here. And I don't mean just looking. I mean, walked over, pulled this back, and there it was. Looked over here and pulled it down, and there it was. And so I try to get my students to understand that to have a life is to be turned on, to be excited about things, to want to do something, not to be dragged kicking and screaming. It's not the virtue of practice that means anything. It's the fact that you really enjoy that thing. You're not trying to get to be a better musician. You're practicing and you want to do that thing. And you do that thing. And then that end will come. All of the things, to me, that we work on, it's important to understand. And now there's brain studies, of course, that confirm this. The amygdala and all this business, that in a heightened emotional state, you will learn better, you will remember better. The analogy I give in class often is, how many people my age do not remember exactly what happened when John F. Kennedy was assassinated? Or in another generation, when the spaceship blew up right off the launch pad? How many people don't remember that? Nobody. Everybody I know exactly what happened that day. I know what people's faces looked like. Why? Because it was such an intensely emotional experience that it instantly imprinted. And it made me realize guys like you or me or Bob Moog and the people that I loved to be around, that's the way they were. Mm. They were passionate people. And the coolness of this present generation and milieu that we seem to be in puts me off a good bit. And that passion that is the experience of the life, not the kudos and the things that you attain. It's got to be something like that. I was in my many travels demoing Moog synthesizers. I think it was Vienna. I couldn't swear to it. It seems that you could sit behind the orchestra even, and it's a weird hall, a beautiful hall, but it looked like engraved in granite at one part of the hall there was this Latin expression. It wasn't even German. It was Latin. And I knew a little Latin, so I was looking there absentmindedly trying to piece what it says until I finally got the gist of it. There is no joy except in seriousness. And wow, people that know me know I rarely draw a long face. I'm telling terrible jokes, cutting up, making a fool of myself because I don't care if people think I'm a fool. And yet I am deadly serious about those things for which I develop a passion. Whether it's golf, which means nothing in my world. It's a good example. I go play golf with guys my age and they can't hit the ball at all. They look like they're, trying to tomahawk the ground. They've never looked at anybody and realized, there's a very narrow window of things you can do to make this work pretty well. Balance, transfer, etc. And then I will hear them say, oh, we're just out here to have fun. And I'm thinking, there are many things that I don't need to do well. But if I decide I would like to do something reasonably well, it's fun to strive to do it well. Not to just say, I'm just out here and it's a park. I have to bring my lunch or something. And that's the way I felt about electronic music and about the people I worked with. Dave Luce, Bob Moog, Jim Scott, my mentors from college, my trumpet teachers, and all that kind of thing. It was that passion that I found was extremely interesting.